Hello, Dr. Rawls here. We're going to talk about what leaky gut is and how to overcome it. Of course, to overcome it, you have to know what it is. And it's something that has become very common in our modern world, and I think is associated with most chronic illnesses. In fact, it is really a fundamental part of most chronic illnesses. There are two primary things that are the driving force for leaky gut, and most digestive dysfunction for that matter: food and stress. Our food has shifted very dramatically. Over the past several thousand years, we've gone from a predominant vegetable matter diet of forage foods to grain and beans, to today, now we're almost exclusively eating grains and beans and meat that's raised from wheat and corn and soybeans. So we've really cut the diversity of our foods down to a very, very low range of foods. The problem with grains and beans is that they're not really natural foods for our intestinal tract. They're not designed for humans or any other creatures to eat. You know, you look at some seeds, like everybody's swallowed a watermelon seed before. That's by design. You eat blackberries, you swallow the seeds, but the seeds are resistant to digestion. The fruit is there to encourage animals to eat the fruit with the seeds in it, and then the well-fertilized seeds get deposited everywhere. It really works for the plant. But when you look at grains and beans, they weren't designed for creatures to eat them. With those kinds of seeds for grasses, it was meant to be blown in the wind, and the nutrients in the seed, the carbohydrate, were actually there for the plant, not for some creature to eat. And the same thing is true with beans. So there are proteins that are natural deterrents in grains and beans called lectins. Lectin proteins, when a creature eats the lectins, it actually damages the lining of the gut. Now, we all do eat some lectins, and there are lectins in all kinds of foods, but not in the concentrations that we're eating today. In addition, you have storage proteins in grains. Storage proteins are proteins to supply the newly growing plant with amino acids. But many of them are very foreign to us. So the most common storage protein that causes us problems is gluten in wheat, because that storage grain is so foreign to us. So so if you've got the lectins and these other proteins, and you're eating some of this occasionally, it's okay. But if that's what your whole diet is, if all you're eating are these carbohydrate-loaded processed grain and bean products, that's a real problem, because not only do you have the lectins, but the high carbohydrate count is disrupting our GI tract. Now you combine that with modern oppressive stress, that daily stress that we all go through, it really compounds the problem. You know, if you look back 100,000 years, you can think about the person, the ancient primitive human that was sitting in the bushes eating berries, very relaxed, no schedule. They went and followed the sun and the moon. No structured time schedule through the day at all. Now we're constantly running a schedule. Everything is on the clock. We're pushed, and when we don't have the stress that's right in our face, we've got it coming at us through media all around the world, and we're all eating on the run, and we're all tense all the time. Well, when you do that, your body puts all the resources into alert mode, into escaping threats, and digestion becomes very secondary. So basically your digestion stops. So you've got your digestive tract slowed by eating all these kinds by all this oppressive stress, and then you're eating these foods that disrupt the lining of the gut everything is sitting there and just stewing. So stomach problems are the natural result, but as it moves into the intestinal tract, you strip away the protective mucus barrier of the gut. And that in itself is a problem, but all those excessive carbohydrates feed bacteria in the gut. Normally our highest concentration of bacteria is in the colon, but if you're eating a lot of carbohydrates, you're also having overgrowth of bacteria in the small bowel, small bowel intestinal overgrowth, and that not only strips the lining away, but also starts damaging the protective cells, the cells that separate the gut from the bloodstream. And that's really important because we want to absorb nutrients, we want to absorb new amino acids, we want to absorb glucose and other things that we need, but there's a barrier there that we don't want all the foreign proteins and bacteria and other things crossing over the gut. So that mucus barrier and that tight junctions between those cells that make up the lining are really important. You strip away that mucus barrier, you overgrow bacteria, and there becomes gaps between the cells. So you have a flood of all these foreign proteins, and if your stomach isn't working and you're not producing enzymes, you don't break down these proteins that are foreign, and they flood through into your bloodstream, along with bacteria. That is what leaky gut is. So when you look at that, what happens is, we all have a little bit of leaky gut, even healthy people, okay? There are some proteins that do escape across, and we have our immune system there on guard to take care of those things. 70% of our immune system is located in our intestinal tract, and there are actually sentry cells all along that protective barrier that produce antibodies so that when a foreign protein crosses, that it gets labeled to get rid of it. So, basically that cell puts a tag called an antibody on that thing, and that thing floats through the bloodstream and ends up in a lymph node where other white blood cells gobble it up and get rid of it. So that's happening in everyone all the time. And at a very low grade, it's not a problem. It's cool. But you strip away that barrier and you disrupt the tight junction between the cells, and you have proteins that are flooding across that membrane, and then so the cells, you're overworking your sentry cells, and they're throwing antibodies on these things, and you're clogging up your lymph nodes, and everything gets backed up, so your whole body gets inflamed with muscle aches and fatigue and brain fog and all of these symptoms. So it's not typically certain proteins, it's everything you're eating. So I had leaky gut when I was going through recovery from chronic illness. I had it pretty bad. 75% of the foods that I was eating were I was sensitive to. And that's very typical. So with leaky gut, there's a lot of food sensitivities, and it's typically the foods that you're eating every day. If you stop eating those foods, typically over months or years, those sensitivities will gradually go away. It's different than another kind of allergy. It's like I'm allergic to shrimp. If I get raw shrimp on my skin, I get hives and an allergic reaction. Fortunately, as long as they're cooked and the protein is denatured, I can eat them just fine. And so I don't have any sensitivities to shrimp as far as a food sensitivity, oddly enough. But I have sensitivities to wheat and nuts and a lot of different foods that I was eating. So part of it is healing the gut. Part of it is avoiding the food. So it's a combined process that you have to go through. First of all, cooking your food, eating a diversity of food, eating foods that are low in reactivity, so cutting down on the grains, cutting down on the beans. Nuts were a real problem for me. Nightshade vegetables can be very reactive. They're high in lectin proteins. So your tomatoes, potatoes, those kinds of things. So a lot of the foods that we eat the most are the ones that are the most reactive. So the first step is you got to move those things out of your diet. You have to eat a better diet. But the other thing is you have to protect the gut. There's some really nice herbals that can do that. Things that have mucilage in them. Mucilage acts like the mucus barrier. Another source that's more commonly used is slippery elm bark that has mucilage. So you take the mucilage as a daily supplement several times a day, and it actually protects the gut. In addition, herbs that balance the gut and balance the gut microbiome and suppress those microbes that have overgrown in the small bowel. Berberine and berberine-containing herbs like golden seal are wonderful for that. So that's another way that you can balance the gut. There are a lot of other really good gut balancing herbs, andrographis, cat's claw, quite a number of them. And they're also good for other purposes when you look at the kinds of microbes that are associated with fibromyalgia and other kinds of illness. Supporting the normal digestive system, taking enzymes, because if you've compromised your gut function, you're not breaking down those proteins. You really want to get those proteins digested. So taking an assortment of enzymes that digest fat and proteins and break down the carbohydrates are really important. So a good general all-around digestive enzyme. You want to get your bile flowing again in your liver and get that liver working again so you can detoxify and digest fats. So herbs that stimulate liver function like dandelion, andrographis, milk thistle are really good for that. All those things are important in that whole recovery process. So diet is a big part of it. The herbs and natural supplements can be a big part of it. Changing the way you go about eating. We're all eating on the run. You grab that bag through the drive-thru and you're heading off in another direction and tossing down food. Really, just taking time to sit back and relax and enjoy your food. Being mindful about eating, being grateful for the wonderful food that we have on this earth, taking time to appreciate every meal, and just changing carrying that into your whole life, being mindful about life, being grateful for this life that we've been given, and approaching it instead of that rat race pace at a slower, more comfortable pace, that you're actually extracting joy from life instead of having to be pushed to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So leaky gut isn't something that you take a pill for and you just get over. Leaky gut is something that you have to look at the causes and come back to center as far as how, as humans, we should be going about life on this earth. As you do that, you will move not only toward digestive wellness, but wellness as total. To find out more about these kinds of topics, please take the time to check out my website, rawlsmd.com. We have a great newsletter that often we send out recipes and food ideas and a lot of things that help people on that pathway to a better diet. Thanks for watching my video. I hope you found it helpful. Be sure and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any upcoming videos. And while you're at it, please take the time to leave me a comment. I would really like to know of any questions that you might want answered in future videos. Thanks for watching.